I'll limit to this one question. Assuming that you're in favor of the governor's proposal on transportation, how do you specifically plan to pay for it? For each of you.
Okay.
Where would you like us to go?
How about if we start, we're going to just start closest to me, that's why you don't want to sit here. And then work down, and then for other questions, I'll go the opposite direction. So, Representative Boyd.
Great question, and something I've gotten a lot of emails on from constituents. I don't think there is a set plan to pay for it. I know tolls are in the mix, and I think there are two sides to tolls. Personally, I'm not wildly opposed to it. I'm not wildly in favor of it. I will probably vote against it just because the largest part of the district I represent would have an enormous impact with the overflow from 95. People avoiding tolls going through our downtown. So, but it's not as the proposal is not as outdated as people, I think, are coming to the conclusion that it is. I think the new technologies make it a viable subject to put on the table. I think more effort should be made on light rail and increasing frequency of Metro North. I think acquiring property, both environmentally. I don't think environmentally widening 95 is the right way to go at all. It just will do what's called induced congestion. The more you widen it, the more people will use it. So I think we need to decouple the car and the economy for environmental reasons and economic reasons. So, thank you.
I'd agree with much of what Terry said. The widening, I think you add more lanes, you add more traffic. The 30-year plan so far is really just it's more of a wish list than anything else. The 5-year plan I have asked for and am going to receive from the Transportation Commissioner a layout really of the order of things and what they really are. We will see that. But in terms of the priorities, I think that the means of transportation that are used the most, and there we have 39 million rides on Metro North every year, that has got to be an enormously high priority because it's also not altogether safe. And in terms of how to pay for it, the House and Senate Republican caucuses suggested a means of bonding over a 30-year period that would give us approximately $1 billion every year in bonding. It does not involve any new bonding. It involves a reallocation of what we already do. That is one suggestion that could work. We did a line item presentation of it. Tolls, we just had a hearing in transportation. About 500 people submitted testimony. It was overwhelmingly against the tolls. But I do believe, and I have heard the governor's budget director and the transportation commissioner agree with this, that the strongest argument against the kinds of border tolls you're seeing made is that A, they're very hard to do in terms of federal restrictions, and B, they don't really raise very much revenue. So there you are.
Everybody's kind of running around with the chicken with their head cut off on the whole issue of tolls, and because that's like the issue right now of how to pay for a $100 billion transportation plan, and that wouldn't even come close anyway. I think that first of all you have to have the vision as to where you want to go, and then you kind of fill in some of the details. The governor's going to put together a nonpartisan commission, and we'll see how that works, kind of much like a transportation strategy board, and look at various ways of proposing things. But as he said, he wants to have an adult conversation about these issues and how to pay for these kinds of things. I mean, frankly, I'm glad for our state for having these conversations because our transportation infrastructure nationally is a disaster, and it's aging infrastructure. And if you just look at Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, there's bridges out there where they've constructed almost a bridge over a bridge underneath the bridge because of falling concrete, so the cars going underneath don't get hit with the falling concrete from the bridge above. I mean, that's an embarrassment for our nation. I think part of the reason for putting out an aggressive plan is because we also have to symbolically and also realistically show the federal government that we're serious about transportation. Because obviously a lot of what we do gets reimbursed or gets paid for by the feds. One of the reasons why I believe that we received the grant to fix the Walk Bridge, which is expensive, and we would have done it on our own if we had to, but at least getting the resiliency money was extremely helpful for us, was because we're finally starting to talk about transportation in a real way, in a comprehensive way. So, I mean, you think about the fact that anybody who travel, obviously around here, we have lots of issues with the interchange, the Merritt Parkway Route 7 interchange that was supposed to be done years ago. Merritt 7 train station that was supposed to, you know, why it never had a walkway up to the Merritt 7 buildings is, you know, beyond me. Some of the other things that are important to this area have to get done. But in addition, around the state, the Hartford Viaduct, that is,
Senator Duff, I'm gonna
I
say.
know, let me just finish a
No,
couple
I'm
more
just
things.
giving you
Hartford
time.
Viaduct is a $5 billion project. The Mixmaster in Waterbury, $7 billion project. So a lot of these things are really expensive. And, you know, are you gonna be able to do all of them? I don't know. But at least let's put it all on the table and then have a conversation about what we need to do.
All right. I'll try to be quick. You know, when you want to build a house, you start with a blueprint, you start with a budget. I look at states like Virginia that have you know, created a 30-year plan, and they're sticking to the 30-year plan. And they are able to budget and allocate resources going forward through public-private partnerships, through really getting the not only you know, what government can do, but also partnering with business and other interested parties to make sure that they are able to fund you know, the next goals on their plan. But to both you know, Senator and Representative Lavielle's point, having a plan would be the start, because you need to execute against something. Otherwise, you know, it's really just kind of a wish. And I think when if you're sort of rehaving the same debates year after year, when you know, about, well, okay, we're debating this road project in this part of the state or that project, and there's no overall like goal. What's you know, is the goal to, you know, ease traffic down here? I you know, have some questions about focusing on widening I-95 when it's clear that down here, you know, deceleration lanes have worked, but you know, there are other solutions. You know, among them light rail, but also just more things that could be more cost-effective and efficient. I'd be happy if Metro North redid the train beds coming through South Norwalk, so a seller can go over 20 miles an hour. I think that these are things that are important, but begins with a plan and begins with you know, prioritizing in the right way and deciding where we want to be in 30 years, and that hasn't happened. I want to see that happen. So that would be a big part of leading the conversation of how we're going to pay for it.
Thank you. Questions?
Um,
I'm going to go to this gentleman, then you, and then the lady back. So first question.
That lady.
Thank you, Laura. So many.
Can you explain to us how the state created a budget that's $60 million out of balance? And what programs or services are going to be affected by that?
do you go this way again?
Oh,
Do you want to alternate or?
Yeah, let's alternate.
Okay.
So let's start with Chris this time.
The budget was created by the governor. There is a you know, as far as you know, how and why they put the budget forward, they felt they needed to. This is the situation. You know, revenues are down significantly. You know, going forward, we don't have a budget until we vote on it, and it's not. I'm not trying to be glib. It's just that there's going to be a lot of negotiation. There are a lot of programs across the board that you know, in health and human services and in just different areas of our state's budget that get hit, and you know, this is where, you know, you don't see this stuff, but this is where the fighting happens. This is where the hearings in our respective committees really matter, and you know, where we have to push to try to, you know, keep you know, funding for housing, for Children's Law Center, for things that are actually, you know, down on a community level to protect those things that matter to us. So this is where the discussion really starts. So it's a broad answer, and, you know, maybe lacking specificity, but, you know, we're just starting this process.
You know, that came out of the Office of Policy Management. I guess if you want the answer, you'd have to go speak to Ben Barnes about that. The issue really is that it is what it is at this point. There's a $60 million budget that's over the cap that they had proposed, and we'll have to deal with it. I mean, it's part of the overall picture, or the jigsaw puzzle of what we have to do with our budget going forward, and putting a budget together that begins on time on July 1st.
Just by way of background, in case anyone didn't catch the reference that Art was making just now, we received the governor's budget proposal on February 18th, and then last week it was in balance and it was supposed to be under the spending cap. And last week we all received a letter from the governor's budget office that said that the budget there was a mistake. It was actually $60 million over the cap. So that's what he's referring to. My answer to the question is I can't explain that. I don't know why that happened. And the primary goal, of course, is to fix it. But and we were told that the governor's budget office was not going to deal with it. The legislature would have to fix it. My bigger question, and the question that most people are asking me, is why we're seeing over $500 million in cuts to social services while state employees over the 2 years are getting collectively raises of about $350 million. And last December, about 200 appointees in state government were getting raises of between 3 and 12%. And so that's a situation that is, I think, very difficult for many people to swallow. And I don't know the reason for that either, because I can't speak for the executive branch, but it has created a problem where many people are very distressed.
Yes, that Gail did outline. The process is the governor's budget usually comes out beginning of January or beginning of February. He was given 2 weeks more time because of the difficult budget situation and the deficit projections for this fiscal year. So the whole budget process starts with the governor's budget. He presents it, then it comes to the legislature. Again, it was something that OPM, I don't think they intentionally did it. I would like to think they didn't intentionally do that. And the spending cap is something that was put in place when the state enacted the income tax in 1990. And it is what protects the state from spending too much money on a percentage basis. It's a fairly complicated formula. But 2 years ago, we started net appropriating the Medicaid dollars that came from the federal government. So that has already been taken out of the calculation for the spending cap. So we are spending money more rapidly and at a higher percent than other states. So that is a concern. And to echo Gail's thoughts, the elephant in the room truly is the state employees union and their benefits that far exceed the private sector. They get 3% raises every year. Their benefit plan, they're on a defined benefit plan. Not too many private corporations are on defined benefit anymore. Most of them have gone to defined contribution. Every time the Republican caucus, and I'll finish my thought, we run an amendment on the budget having all future employees, not current employees. I think we all respect certainly the work these state employees union members do. We understand why unions exist, but they are right now stepping over what's fair and what's equitable. So when we talk about equity, that conversation has to be very much an important part of the dialogue. What I wanted to say when I tried to stay on track was most of us, the legislature, we do have very good working relationships across the aisle. I have great respect for my colleagues on human services. We agree on most policies. Where we disagree is on fiscal policy and how we address our state's budget and the most important issues in the state. And the public sector union, they got damn elected, and they are sitting in the driver's seat. So that's something I think we all need to be aware of.
Thank you. So we have your question, then Lisa's, then we'll go at Pete. Anyone else after? Diane and then her. So, okay.
The question just came up about the selection process for the registrar of voters, whether they should be reduced to one for each community, and also whether they should be appointed or elected. How do you feel about that?
Would like to?
I'll start.
Good question.
Yeah, that is a very good question. I mean, this all stems from some of the issues that have happened in Bridgeport, Hartford, and there are some other communities that I can't remember right now, some smaller towns, So it's not just a big city issue of difficulties with registrars. And ensuring everybody has the right to vote and the ability to vote and can vote in a timely way. So the Secretary of the State, who arguably is our chief elections enforcement official, but arguably doesn't have a whole lot of power to do things. So if Denise Merrill's our Secretary of the State right now, there's a problem in Hartford, or there's a problem in Brookfield, or wherever, she really doesn't have a lot of statutory authority to force or to come on high and say you've got to do this or do that. Things either get resolved in court, or she can just ask for things to be done. So I think part of her whole process is to put more accountability into the election process, put more accountability in with the town clerk, because the town clerk would then, the registrar would be under the town clerk and report to that person. Yeah, I can't say what's going to happen with that right now. That's in front of the General Administrations and Elections Committee at this point. What I've read from media accounts on that is that we'll have a very tough time getting through the legislature this year. So there's a tradition of independence with registrars. There's a tradition of having a Democratic and Republican registrar. Hartford has a Working Family Party registrar too. There's that tradition, and whether or not, so I don't know what the answer is going to be.
And one person handle the load, that's the other question.
Well, I think it would be one person who would be the registrar with staff underneath. I don't think it would just be one person. I just think it would be a registrar, a nonpartisan registrar versus a Democratic registrar and a Republican registrar.
Would anyone else like to? Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Okay, yeah, I did have a chance to talk to one of the Secretary of State's people. Basically, the effort is to try to professionalize the position where, because under the current system, it's a local elected position, and essentially the requirements to run and win elective office aren't necessarily consistent with the skills needed to do the job of registrar voters. I think that's part of the drive. That said, it is I do see it as a big job for any one person, so they'd have to bring people in. But also, one of the weak parts of the argument for me, though, is that somehow the person that would be put into this position would be somewhat apolitical, because they're trying to serve as a town manager, where it's somebody's hired just based on their skills, but it's at the behest or the whim of whoever the chief elected person in the city would be who would be hiring him. So there is some obviously some allegiance. So I think that part of the argument is weak. But I agree with Senator Duff. I don't see this getting a lot of traction. I think I think though that I would like to see where there are where we can improve the training or the basically the capability of the folks doing this work. I think that is a big issue, and I think it's it's going to be part of this debate. But I'm just not sure that this is going to be the bill that does it.
One more comment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I agree that there are some flaws in the current system, obviously. But as we all try to work and do things that are best for the state, we usually try to take off the political hat and do it, and everybody work together. Elections are special because people are actually voting. I mean, it becomes political, and the current system has that advantage of one Democrat, one Republican, and one representative of some other party if that party has enough people in that town. But if you're going to try to improve the management, the Secretary of State's office is, whoever holds it, whether it's a Democrat, Republican, or something else, it is also a political office. And so there are some difficulties involved in this particular proposal, which may be one of the reasons why it may not be lined up to get much traction, but that would be a concern.
Yeah, just briefly following up, I agree with a lot of the good comments made. I don't see it getting much traction. I think having 2 registrars makes a lot of sense in a number of ways. So I just don't see it getting, there's so much going on this session to begin with. I read that online and went, oh, it's just, we have other more important things.
Actually, I have to agree with Representative Wood's remark there. I had the same gut reaction. Really? This is like,
Yeah,
of
it's
everything
like,
else that we're
enough.
focusing on,
Yeah.
Enough.
this
But-
is...
Way too much
Right.
to do.
The other key piece that I'm always baffled about, and I'm surprised to learn that the Secretary of State does not have statutory authority. I'm surprised and disappointed in that because Bridgeport they have behaved in a shocking, irresponsible way. And so has Hartford this last election, and that should be dealt with, and it hasn't been. So, and I do believe the Secretary of the State could be dealing with that in a more effective way than she has been.
So Lisa, and I'm actually going to go after Lisa to the one in the red vest. Your turn.
I'm so glad we talked about. I have a question about budget issues and in education as it continues to plague us. The state is holding intra-district magnets to previous budget cycles, so a cut more or less if your expenses are going up. I'm fine with holding spending. We need to rein in our spending. But right now, magnets and intra-district magnets are supposed to have a 30% out-of-district students. Right now in Norwalk, we have CGS, which is an inter-district magnet. It's got 55% out-of-district students. Magnets have been good for Norwalk, both intra and inter-districts. We've got Columbus, Jefferson, we've got PTAC and CGS. But, and I've also been a long advocate, as all of you have been, about getting Norwalk more of its fair share of ECS funding. Also an advocate of probably funding following the child. But some policy decisions are going to have to be made regarding how you fund magnet schools, and given that the budget gaps are not likely to go away anytime soon. So we have, we have a policy. You can either start charging out-of-state districts tuition if their kids come to our school, or you have to either start cutting teachers or cutting students. We have a policy for how we deal with teachers. We don't have a policy for how we deal with students. Currently, right now, there's 80 Bridgeport students in CGS. So if there is a budget gap and you end up having to either cut students or a teacher, if we can't figure out how to fund the gap in CGS, and this is part of a bigger issue which gets at ECS and money, just how you fund education in general. I'm curious as to all of your thoughts about how you might solve a specific issue like this that we might be facing next year in global studies.
This is the education.
Good morning, Lisa.
Let me make you a lot of
CGS is our global
Center for Global,
It's Brian McMahon.
Center for
And
Global
Magnet's been
Studies.
very good for a school district, a city like Norwalk, where we have so much diversity and wanting to
Sure.
provide choice. So we're kind of double educating kids from other cities. And who do you cut? Do you cut the kids from other cities? Do you cut Norwalk kids?
I'm sorry that you weren't at the public hearing in education on Wednesday. You would have, you can still watch it on CTN.
Will I
And
want to?
what I know, first I'll tell you, I've had some detailed conversations already with the folks over at Brian McMahon at CGS, and I understand what their problem is, and it's grave. It's very grave. Little background for you all in the governor's budget, and I'm just going to take a second to answer it if that's okay. In the governor's budget proposal, and it is still a proposal at this stage, ECS funding, the thing we all love to hate and want more of in this city, ECS funding is held flat, and there are some increases for magnets and charter schools. The magnet school increases, however, the way that the bill is written, it actually gives the criteria that determine which magnet schools get the funding first. And the way that it's written, that funding goes to the chef schools in Hartford before it goes anywhere else.
What a surprise.
Right, so there's some language in that bill that I particularly want to look at and discuss. I don't know where we're going to get with it, but I do want to discuss it. Now, what I wanted to tell you about the hearing is that over the past 4 to 6 years, the state has been very focused on trying to get federal grants and federal waivers. which basically means do the same thing for all the districts around the state, make a lot of promises and change a lot of laws so that you get the federal grant or the federal permission. We don't have a lot of that going on this year. So there's more focus on, what do individual districts need and what is really going on in each place where there's a hot button issue. For the first time in this hearing, the level of acrimony between the charters, magnets, and traditional public schools reached a point, somebody cried. It was very vicious. I have never heard it like that. There is going to be a lot of dialogue like this. I do not know where it will come out. But I do think there are some small things that have to be looked at in the language of the governor's bills so far that may alleviate some stress someplace. I didn't answer your question very well, but that's where we are right now.
Well, I mean, what happened, what I like.
Lisa, I have to say what you
You get rid of Norwalk kids, you get rid of Bridgeport kids.
Well, we do, the Bridgeport kids pay more to come to
They do.
Center
They
for
don't
Global.
pay.
Yes, they do.
No, the state, they don't pay,
State.
the districts don't contribute, the
The
state
state
gets
does, but
$7,000, I
additional,
understand the
yeah.
difference
That's
between
right.
a Norwalk
I'm just
kid
making
and
sure
a
it's
Bridgeport.
accurate, yeah.
So
They don't pay.
I just need to understand.
The
The state pays,
State pays.
which is with our tax dollars
Right,
for Bridgeport to come back to our schools.
right.
Okay.
There's about 4 criteria, if I remember correctly, about the effects Center for Global Studies.
Please speak up.
I'm sorry, there's about 4 criteria that, for the magnet schools, like Center for Global Studies, that we probably have to, there needs to be a 5th criteria to be able to incorporate CGS, and that's something that we had a meeting over there, and we're going to work to try and resolve.
No, it would be somewhat similar, just that, look, I have a 10-year-old who goes to Jefferson Magnet. It's a phenomenal school. Obviously, you see the real impact, and I think that to Senator Duff alluded to, we did have a constructive meeting, and we have our marching orders to try to bring some parity to this. So.
I think it's all been said. Thank you. But thank you for great question. Thank you for bringing it.
I'm going to go to the woman in the back, and then I'll come to Pete and Diana and then Joe.
I have 2 kids in elementary school, and kind of another education question. We go to Brookside, and I don't really understand, and nor do I want a lesson right now on how the funding is allocated per city or whatever. All I'd like to ask you guys is, all I ever hear is that Norwalk is getting gypped. I don't honestly know if that's true, because I don't really understand all of it. But if in fact we are, which you guys I would assume would know if we are, what are you doing about it? And what do you plan to do about it? And what is happening? And that's it. But I don't want a lesson on how.
I don't want to
the funding
monopolize
happens.
this again.
It's a simple question. I would just say this, very simply and broad-based. There's obviously there's an ECS formula that's been out there, educational cost sharing has been out there for a very long time. And a lot of it is depending on grand lists and property values, and we have a high grand list here versus other cities and towns, so the formula is not in our favor. There are other formulas or other ways in which we can try and receive money, which we've been working on, though it has been tough over the last few years with our fiscal situation. But in addition to education and cost sharing, we have priority school district money. We also have Alliance Funding Commissioners Network. We've been doing very well on the early childhood piece as well. But I will just say, as you asked, what are we doing about it? It's not something you can answer in like 30 seconds. It's a very open-ended question, and it's a little bit subjective. But I will say that whether it's Democratic or Republican, anybody in the delegation, it's our #1 priority to help fight for education funding. There's been times where we've been on the defensive from a standpoint of we were slated to lose money, and we've been able to take that back. There's been times where we have been successful in getting additional money. And there's times where we're just trying to hold on to what we have depending on the fiscal situation. But I will just say to you, as I would say to any parent, that it's a direct relation to our property taxes and what other ways in which we can allocate money to the city, and it's something that we take very, very seriously, and that it's very important to us to make sure that we're always working to try and make up some of the lost ground that hasn't been there from years past.
It is based on the value of the property, all these letters. Thank you, ECS, not excess cost grant. ECS is based on property values. That's one of the pieces that get fit into the formula, and Stanford and Norwalk do take a hit because we do have higher property values. It's also based on how many kids get school lunch, free school lunch. So those are the two of the factors. We need to figure out how to rebalance it for Norwalk and Stanford. The ECS formula.
Very quick addition to that. I actually, last session and the session before that, did twice propose revisions to the formula with some more taking into account median income. And it got shot down both times because, among other reasons, since there was no additional ECS money, the view was, yes, but you would have to take it away from what other cities already get. So that is one reason it keeps getting thrown out, but of course, we're not going to stop.
Well, I was just going to quickly interject. I mean, for us to get more money, we have to convince other cities to take less, and that's a challenge, to say the least. So there are we're also exploring this. There is this a lawsuit to try to reconfigure the formula, but again, people basically south of Bridgeport, okay, that are on that do have higher property values. We are this all sort of unites every legislator that's dealing with this. We are pushing, but that's basically the thumbnail version of this.
Pete, then Diane.
In the opening statements, Senator Duff made a comment, but it's for everybody, the question is for everybody, about the unemployment rate going down from 9% to 6%. And what I'd like to know is how much of that has to do with people who have stopped looking for jobs, how many have moved out of state, and how many of those jobs that we have created, if there's been any created, are minimum wage jobs?
Great question.
Yeah, good question,
Do you
Pete.
want to assign how you want us to?
Yeah, let's go from this way down.
Okay, yeah, thank you, great question. It is a combination of all those factors. People have stopped looking for work. The biggest job increase are in minimum wage jobs. They're not in the higher wage jobs because they're not coming to Connecticut. It's still seen as not a business-friendly state. Our unemployment rate, while it is down, it is definitely down, it is not as low as other states are, and especially in the higher level jobs. So it's something we need to be continually addressing.
Yeah, I would add, and I don't have the statistics on the tip of my tongue. We do have net out migration at the moment from the state. There is a shrinkage of the workforce. I know the year before last, we shrank more than any other, our workforce shrank more than any other state. And there was a recent Gallup poll the last couple of months that although the unemployment is going down in Connecticut, Gallup ranked Connecticut as last among the 50 states in terms of job growth.
Yeah, thanks. I don't have the statistics offhand. I can tell you that when people are giving up looking for work, a lot of times the number will, well, let's just say this, the number has come down. I think that there are more people now looking for work because the economy is improving. And so therefore, what ends up happening is when people re-enter, you'll actually see an uptick in the unemployment rate. And we've seen a downturn seeing the unemployment rate go down. I think we've had some decent jobs that have come into the state. I mean, matter of fact, we've had helped thousands of businesses with the Small Business Express program. We've had companies like Datto come into Norwalk, which is one of the fastest growing IT companies in the entire country. We've had another company coming in called Jarden, which the average salary is about $300,000 per person. And these are companies I helped facilitate with the Department of Economic and Community Development, another company in Greenwich that I helped with as well. So I think it's incumbent upon all of us to lay the groundwork and then also to work towards either growing organically or bringing companies in from outside. So I know you, Pete, as the chairman of the Republican Town Committee, you might have a dim view as to some of the policies of the Malloy administration, but you know, I think that some of those are up for debate, and that my view is not quite the same as yours.
Just yeah, really quickly. You know, Norwalk's unemployment is at 5.2. In the last 18 months, Norwalk is there have been about 2,000 people that have found jobs. I don't know how long they're. I don't know. We've got a 2,000 job pickup in the last 18 months in the Norwalk area. It's hard to say if that's because you know, because of the economy, business moving in. It's hard to say, but you know, you look at UBS and RBS. You know, we're seeing it all. You know, every indication. You know, we're seeing outflows there. We're seeing people leave. At the same time, again, you know, we're talking about Deco, FactSet, and some other companies that have moved into Norwalk. What I'm trying to do, and I know just work with my colleagues here, you know, we're trying to create a better environment for businesses that want to set up in cities, that want to come to the state of Connecticut. It's a challenge, you know, but it's something we have to keep pushing because, you know, we're trying not only trying to help businesses be more productive, to, you know, trying to reduce, you know, a lot of the regulatory overhead, a lot of the issues that have just, you know, bedeviled, frustrated businesses in the past, but to create, you know, reasonable incentives that, you know, for, you know, company expansion, you know, hiring people, you know, purchasing equipment, and, you know, basically, you know, tax exemptions and things that will help businesses want to grow organically here. So we're trying to build from the bottom up. So to deal with, you know, a lot of other sort of macro forces that are you know, that have hurt our state. And, you know, we can get into, you know, how and why we're here, but the fact is there are things that we know we can be doing, and we are trying to do that to, you know, to make sure that businesses can grow here, but it's a tough fight.